7 Days to Die has a lot of problems, at least according to 27,491 people on Steam. According to one of them, this game makes me want to spew out of my at abnormal speeds while I'm bleeding from my from the amount of CBT this game puts me through when playing. In all seriousness though, today I'd like to take a look at some of these reviews and see what reasons people are giving for disliking the game. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard comes from Glock9. Let's listen to him.
Let's talk about hate and criticism for a second. When someone criticizes your work, don't just classify them as a hater and move on. I mean, you could do that, but you won't improve at all. Now, instead of just saying that person's a hater, ignoring their statement, and not changing myself in any way, I say to myself, well, if this person took the time to write this out and post it, how many other people feel the same way but just aren't saying anything? Don't block out the haters. Take that negative feedback and try and use it to make yourself better. I know that's easier said than done, but you gotta do your best. Try and keep it positive.
I'll be analyzing and critiquing the current state of the game, its progression over time, and the decisions made by the development team, the Fun Pimps. I'll also be trying to stay as civilized, constructive, and unbiased as possible, and I hope you'll join me for some respectful conversation down in the comments. I will preface this by saying that even after 2,600 hours in the game, I'm still enjoying almost every minute of it. 7 Days is a wonderful game, and I'm so glad that I bought it after the release of Alpha 19. But it is far from perfect, so let's find out why. And if you have an extra second while you're watching this, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Never-ending early access. 8 years in early access is an abuse of that system. This game is still in alpha, the longest alpha known to man. 9 years in early access. That is ridiculous. Still in alpha after 10 years, still alpha quality. 9 years of development, I have no idea what they are doing. 10 years is too long to be in early access. I've obtained 2 additional degrees in that time. Even great artists know when it's time to put the brush down and move on. 9 years later, it's still in alpha. LMFAO. They say things get better with age. Whiskey, cheese, wisdom. 7 Days to Die bucks this adage with panache. After 10 years in the pot, this game is overcooked. The year is 2100, and 7 Days to Die is out of alpha. All residents of the Moon Colony and Mars celebrate on the oldest and most stable zombie survival game in the past century.
After all these years, I don't understand the desire to say, let's rubber stamp it gold, and therefore it's good, you know? It's an interesting thought there. It's like, you guys must suck because you haven't gone gold yet.
7 Days to Die did, in fact, release almost 10 years ago. It was actually almost exactly 9 years ago, back in December 2013. The game has been in early access ever since. Since one of the common themes here in these negative reviews is the fact that the game is still in early access, I thought I'd hop on over to Wikipedia to just get a better understanding of what early access means. Of course, this definition isn't necessarily a rule, and the early access police aren't going to come and arrest anyone who doesn't adhere to this description, but according to Wikipedia, early access to a game is typically offered when the game is in a playable state, but may not be feature complete, or may still have several software bugs to be found. Often these games are considered at alpha or beta releases, and may be months or years from anticipated completion. Interested players are able to buy into the development of the game, gaining access to the software in the working state, and are encouraged to play and stress test the software. Their feedback can help the developers tune the game's direction, art, and software mechanics in anticipation of a final release. So the Fun Pimps haven't ever, to my knowledge, given us a solid release date. So it's not like the game keeps getting delayed and we really haven't been technically deceived. They've just taken an approach of prolonged but somewhat consistent development. But 10 years is a very long time to be in early access. In fact, Steam didn't even launch its early access service until March of 2013, the same year that 7 Days to Die was released. Now, it's worth noting, what we're watching right here now is what the game looked like back then, and obviously it looks like kind of garbage compared to how the game looks today. So we've really made it a long way over the past 9 to 10 years, but it's still certainly understandable that a lot of people want a finished product after all this time. And it is kind of important to point out that more people are working on the game today than there ever have been before.
Team size now, we're getting close to 60.
Almost 60 people, according to the founders of the Fun Pimps. The game has changed dramatically since its early inception, so much so that you could make an argument that it's an entirely different game right now. So I can see why people are upset with the changes over the years. They start playing the game one way, only to have the rug sort of pulled out from under them, with changes to game mechanics and even system requirements. But as popularity of the game has increased, so has the pressure to continue evolving the game, both to satisfy the original vision of the developers, compete with rival titles, and also to appease the growing number of new players. Despite many enjoyable features, such as the addition of vehicles and electricity, more variety in questable buildings, and upgraded graphics, this steady transition over time has not been all sunshine and rainbows. The game is poorly optimized. Vehicles just vanish. Blue screen of death. Please optimize. Good God! Patch 20.4 absolutely messed up my server and forced a wipe. Buggy, unoptimized mess. Focus on fixing the bugs and ironing out the jankiness that honestly characterizes the game at this point. Not focusing on optimizing for so long. Worst optimized game I've ever played. Still janky after 9 years of early access. It eats up system memory like locusts the grain field. This is one of the most poorly optimized games I've ever played. When someone asks for the definition of buggy mess, I use this game for an example. We've been waiting a long time for you to fix this game's performance. I can infer that this game has poor optimization despite my PC reaching the desired specifications. Fix your bugs before launching a new alpha. After many years of updates, this game became very, very laggy. Lag. The game constantly crashes on me. Game crashes for no reason. It randomly crashes. Null reference exception. Poop. Game keeps crashing. Can't fix null reference exception. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. I didn't even pay for this game and I want a refund.
Performance is important to us, and we might even delay this build if we don't think our performance is on par or better than the last alpha. Once the artists could stop making content, they can actually optimize that content. But likely the best optimizations will come with gold when we can actually content lock, and the guys are no longer working on new stuff. It's fix.
Performance, particularly in multiplayer, is becoming an increasing problem. Low frame rates, critical bugs like falling through the play area and disappearing vehicles, and console errors are incredibly frustrating to deal with, especially when they appear to get worse with each update instead of better. The game is, however, in a working state. You could play hundreds of hours without encountering any real significant issues, so the developers are technically delivering on their end, at least to some degree. It's like trying to hit a moving target. So for example, all of these new models are going to be added in Alpha 21, and that's going to cause a decrease in performance. So you have to address that, work on that, fix it. And then you're adding in bandits, and that also tanks the performance. So you have to work on that and address that. And then they're overhauling the water physics. And so you have to sort of work on that as well. So you're constantly chasing your tail when kind of you could otherwise just be working toward finishing the additional new content and then going back and then working on performance. And that's seemingly what they're trying to do. They're going to keep performance at least stable while adding and changing things. And then when they have content lock, they'll go back and they'll start the optimization process in earnest. And a lot of people take issue with that. And although I understand their rationale, it still hurts to suffer through a large multiplayer session despite having a top-end server and playing on a top-end computer. And after 10 years of continuous changes, a lot of people are just ready for content lock so that we can start getting all of these bugs fixed already. On the one hand, they use early access as a shield to say that's why the game isn't fully optimized, but almost in the same breath, they wonder why everyone wants the game to go gold. I've come to dread every new tweak. It gets old trying to relearn the game for the 6th time. They are currently making changes to systems that don't need changed. Living off the land is now tedious. Changing systems back and forth is the main problems the developers have, as they simply do not know what they want. The devs actually just don't know what they want to do with it and keep changing features that already work well. Empires will rise and fall before the Fun Pimps figure out what they want this game to be. Once they started dumbing down everything, it went to changing them again. Devs that seemingly have no idea what they're doing. They've changed the game so much, so many times now, despite community backlash. The game now is completely different from the game I crushed into a fine powder and snorted like a fiend for months, reworking the leveling system with every update and messing with things like farming. Every few alpha updates updates, they change a fundamental part of the game. The devs seem too focused on changing leveling systems and early game rather than adding promised features from their Kickstarter. I'm not enjoying the devs changing the way that it is played every time they do a new alpha. The game has been consistently and constantly dumbed down to make it more arcade-like. The Fun Pimps have begun to confuse me with their priorities for updates. Pure sludge, disgusting, stinky, clunky sewage, hot, swampy, black tar, molten slag.
We're redoing old systems that were placeholder or very old and thrown in real quick, refining existing systems, and we're working on new systems. So but we're moving more towards polishing and refining rather than so much new.
You get your best analytics for a game when you're done and you're not moving a bunch of stuff around. You're going, what is our final game balance? We've taken a lot of steps there.
So as I said before, and as we've demonstrated in some of this old footage, the game is profoundly different than it was even a few years ago. Many systems have been completely overhauled in order to restrict certain playstyles and what the developers consider as exploits. Some mechanics like weapon crafting have been grossly simplified, and this is frustrating as a player to learn and adapt to one system only to have it changed a year or two later and then changed again perhaps even shortly after that. And so yes, the devs have defended this behavior by claiming that they want players to actually experience the full spectrum of what the game has to offer, to feel challenged and to feel threatened by the zombies.
However, sometimes we need to change or limit some features so that the majority of the playstyles are not hindered by supporting that particular playstyle, or there's an exploit like, oh, I don't like it when zombies dig underground. Well, we don't like exploits in our survival game. So
when something makes it so, there's like no risk or no fear, no nothing. Like if something can be exploited that bad, we've got to fix that. We've got to address it. So it can't be so easy that people miss a major chunk of the game because they build an underground base. And so when you take out any cheesy exploit and all of a sudden you have to think and use your brain, hey, I'm having fun again. I'm engaged. I'm not on autopilot destroying this game. We close a few loopholes and let players reinvent how they survive. And to me, that makes the game feel like a brand new game all over again.
So in the past, the zombies were too easy to kite around, and so they increased the zombies' attack range. Players started digging down to bedrock to completely avoid the horde, so they made zombies dig. Back when we had learn by doing progression system, players were just crafting thousands of stone axes in order to increase their crafting skill, and so a new skill progression system was implemented. And my last example I'll give here is players were using vehicles like the gyrocopter to just fly around on horde night and avoid the zombies altogether, and so they implemented super vultures. So on the one hand, the purpose of the game being in early access is so that players can, as we said before, stress test the game and find the exploits so that the developers can then identify where the problems lie and fine-tune the game's systems to avoid that happening again in the future. The devs want the game to be challenging, so nerfing playstyles that nullify the threat of zombies on horde night or skip progression systems is necessary in order to achieve that. Personally, I enjoy it when they try to make the game more difficult. After all, I do like being challenged, and I like trying to figure out the optimal way to survive without cheesing too much in order to get there. However, what I don't like is when they make changes that don't really seem necessary, like the farming change or the new front sight posts in Alpha 20, and the proposed murky water change in the thematic armor outfits that they've touted as coming out in the future. These changes don't seem to me like they're adding very much to the game. They're not solving any fundamental problem or exploit. They're just moving that target further and further away. And that brings us full circle back to being in early access for 10 years. We seem to be in this loop of trying to modernize the game with new graphics, gameplay mechanics, and systems overhauls, which then decreases performance, which then delays release, which then leads to more ideas and more things to be added to the game and fixed and so on. And that's a gross oversimplification, but you kind of get the point. Sadly, attempting to talk to them about this on their forums gets you nowhere, so I just steer clear. The response by the devs has been been indigent or outright insulting. The responses that concerned players get are often lacking information or mocking/insulting, ignoring all feedback. This game ruined my life, and now I will never experience sincere emotion ever again.
We mostly listen to the community on things like game balance and things that players are stuck on, or exploits. But as far as main features and design changes, we rely on our team to make those decisions. TFP has big debates over designs that we think are very important to everyone, the team, the players, and our goal is always to try to do what's best for the game.
There also seems to have been a breakdown in communication at some point. The game was released at Alpha 5 on Steam on December 13th, 2013, with previous versions being available only to Kickstarter backers. We had 5 alphas in 2014, 3 in 2015, 2 in 2016, then over 1 year passed until Alpha 16, 5 months later Alpha 17, 24 months later Alpha 18, 9 months later Alpha 19, and a whopping 19 months again until Alpha 20, and we're going on about 12 months here waiting for Alpha 21. So all of this is not to point out that there has been slow development. 7 Days is very much a unique style of game, which is reportedly very complex to create.
It's a challenging game. It goes back to the game design. I want a world where I can go through cities, I can bring down skyscrapers, I can build anything I want. It's populated with lots of zombies. It's multiplayer.
And we want it to look pretty. That's the hard part with doing all the cool stuff.
Guess what? No AAA who has made a game like this yet. Why not? Because it's too hard. That's why. It's got too many features. It's Grand Theft Auto, where you can destroy the entire world, and you can go in every building and play a quest in every building, and build anything you want in multiplayer environment. That's pretty darn ambitious, with random gen cities that look realistic, that are generated on the fly for replay value. RPG system with skills. You got more features than 10 games, and we're
looting. The list of features just goes on and on.
I can't speak to the truth of that because I'm not a game developer, but it is true that you don't see very many other open world voxel games quite like 7 Days to Die. Anyway, instead, I point out these dates to give you a frame of reference for how often we've been hearing from the devs. Years ago, when updates were fast, we'd be hearing a lot more from the devs, and we'd get more of a consistent picture of how the progress was coming along with the game. It gave the opportunity to ingest small changes, evaluate them, and move on. But at some point, the updates began getting stretched out further, and they got a lot bigger. We started getting massive content drops with so many changes that several important ones were never even listed in the patch notes, like not being able to find working workstations in the world anymore as of Alpha 20. And in the interim periods, we hear very little from the devs. Some other companies, for example, Inflection Games, who are making an upcoming survival game called Nightingale, which I've been following very closely, are always posting to social media, their YouTube channel, and updating their website, showing off features from their game and talking about development. I feel like I'm along for the journey with them as they produce and polish their game. With 7 Days to Die, we're mostly in the dark. Occasionally, we get an art update on Twitter, like the recent posts showing off some of the new models, which were contracted out to Decagon Studios, or we get a literal riddle or puzzle to solve in order to uncover some minor new feature on the forums. Developer live streams have been restricted to the weeks leading up to the new alpha release, and otherwise it's pretty much radio silence. And the silence can be deafening. Not knowing what's being worked on, why changes are being made, or what's going to happen in the future leaves many of the most ardent followers and supporters of the game feel like they're being ignored. Does the community really have a voice in how the game is made?
We always try to listen to the community as long as what they want aligns with our design sensibilities and our business goals.
Going back to the definition of early access, the consumer's role is to provide feedback on the game for the developers to at least consider when it comes to further development. Are we just apes in a cage, basically, stress testing their software under observation for them to tweak as they see fit? Or are we in collaboration with them to help them develop their revolutionary game idea on the road to release? So, what's the solution here? Unfortunately, we're too far down the rabbit hole to turn back now, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. After my interview with the developers asking about a roadmap to gold, they actually did release a small list of items we can expect in the final release of the game. We're expecting to see bandits, armor, weather, and factions in the Alpha 21 or 22 timeframe, with the story being ready for gold. Once we get these big game systems out of the way, we can expect them to start polishing the game. I would love to see the developers take a more active role in engaging the community. And by that, I don't mean the same 1 or 2 people responding to forum posts. For example, speaking with content creators, commenting on YouTube videos, commenting on social media posts, and making more social media posts to begin with are all great ways to make people feel like they're being listened to and not willfully ignored. Additionally, it would be so much better if we could just get some content updates in smaller, more manageable chunks instead of these massive overhaul updates we've been seeing over the past few years. That would give us an opportunity to test out the changes in bite-sized chunks, while also having more consistent exchanges with the development team. At this point, we can only hope that they don't start overhauling other in-game systems in the meantime. And they've already said that Bandits would likely be delayed until Alpha 22 because they want to finish them instead of releasing something that's half-baked, perhaps learning from previous experiences.
Bandits are likely not going to make this alpha because after all this time waiting for them, we don't want it to be like a partial version or incomplete version.
The big reveal needs to be a big reveal and not just, well, this is 20% of what we have envisioned.
If something turns out bad, we'll fix it. And we know that some changes have been met with skepticism, yet each alpha exceeds the concurrent player peak and daily active users of the last alpha, which to me is a good indicator that we're on the right track. Yeah, it's we can't always make everybody happy. There's always going to be a certain sector that is nostalgic about an old feature that we changed. Fortunately, we've only had, some pitchforks and we've had a mob of pitchforks where we were like, guys, calm down, we're going to fix this, we're going to balance this. We think just unbalanced. We've shipped some undercooked features before. In the end, when we patched them, people were like, oh, I guess I understand what your intent was now. What it says to me is they care about our game and they love our game, even if it's coming across in maybe not a flattering way.
The last thing that we should talk about, and I'll keep this part brief, is the console version. This is the #1 most controversial topic regarding the game, and I don't think the story of the problems of 7 Days to Die would be complete without touching on this. The events that led us to the current state of the console version are probably not widely known, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version right now. In 2016, the Fun Pimps sold publishing rights for the console version of 7 Days to Die to Telltale Games. A lot of times, an indie development team like the Fun Pimps will handle development and publishing themselves, but sometimes they can save a lot of money and free up manpower by just outsourcing the marketing and release, returns, etc. to another company. So that happened, and the Fun Pimps were providing console updates to Telltale Games to then distribute to console users. But in 2018, about 2 years later, Telltale Games closed abruptly. Their game licenses and assets were sold to Sherwood partners, including 7 Days to Die. So for some time, the Fun Pimps did not have publishing rights, legal rights for their own game. And legally, they could not provide updates for it. And I guess they kind of stopped working on it too then. So that lasted for about a year, and then they did manage to reacquire the publishing rights. But then earlier this year, they announced that they'd hired a new team internally to resume working on the console version. So obviously this was a huge snafu. And now it's kind of just this big money game. It would take a lot of money and manpower and time to get 7 Days ported back onto consoles. So understandably, they're waiting for more or less of a content lock state, just like we discussed with optimization, but at least they are working on it, and they've even set some lofty goals for what they think it'll look like, including crossplay with PC.
Telltale went insolvent, and our product got stuck in legal land for some good time. This time we're paying for it, so we're able to make those decisions that are proper. Basically, we'd like to support full res textures, full draw distance, 10K worlds, persistent servers for console players, and crossplay.
So a lot of people got burned by this and continue to be, because the console version is still up for sale and people are still buying it, often thinking it'll look the same way that it does like on my YouTube videos, for example, only to find out that it's stuck in Alpha 15. It feels like a bait and switch scam, and it kind of is. So I won't defend what the Fun Pimps did or what they're doing now, but in knowing the story and how it all went down, I at least have a better understanding of why. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a few things to do. The first is to just take a break. I have a lot of exposure to feedback about the game, both because I'm actively following the game on social media and the forums, and because I create a lot of content for it. And sometimes the comments are downright vicious. And if you're feeling this upset about the game, it's time to take a step back. I also highly recommend that you get into modding. 7 Days can be really easy to make mods for, and if there's some gripe you have about the game, I guarantee there's a modder out there that's fixed it for you. I have a video on how to install mods and also a video on my top 20 quality of life mods. You can find the links to those in the description. Ultimately, early access games just might not be right for you, and that's okay. They can be unpredictable and unstable, and for some players, it might just be better to revisit the game when it goes gold, and you can see if you enjoy it more then. And my last thought on this is to just try to enjoy the game for what it is and remain flexible. It's difficult to judge a proposed change until you've actually tested it. Sure, I might not like the sound of something on the surface, but I'm open to try new things and see how they feel in action. 7 Days is not perfect, and I challenge you to name a game that is. A game that's universally loved and adored by its fans. Yes, despite the flaws of 7 Days to Die and its creators, the Fun Pimps, the game is still very well received, with currently an 86% positive review rate in recent reviews, and 88% in total reviews on Steam. The last thing that I'd like to bring up here today is a forum post by Roland, which goes over all of the original Kickstarter campaign claims by the Fun Pimps for 7 Days to Die. It lists them one by one and indicates whether they've been fulfilled or unfulfilled. If there was ever any doubt that the Fun Pimps are not delivering on their original promises, this forum post mostly puts that to bed. The game has never looked better and provided as good of a sandbox for building and exploring than it does right now. I love this game more than any other, and I'll be enjoying it and covering it on my channel for many years to come. This review right here really sums it up for me. There's zombie titty jiggle physics, 10 out of 10. Wait, not that one. This game is the pinnacle of the survival crafting genre. Yes, it's still an alpha. Yes, it has bugs and flaws, but I keep coming back time after time to start a new game because it's so much fun. I can't wait for the next alpha to drop so I can start a new game and experience it all over again. This game is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, 100% reason to purchase the game. You spelled refund wrong. Hey everyone, my name is Temricky, and I just wanted to say thank you for watching, for leaving a like, but most of all, thank you to the long list of amazing supporters that you see here. I hope this episode has earned your subscription, and I can't wait to show you the next one. Best wishes to all, and goodbye.